Welcome to Activate Your Introvert, the weekly radio show to uncover and unlock the entrepreneurial skills in your business. In this week's show, a tip to help you get more from your working from home team. Introvert myth of the week. Introversion can be cured. Just speak up. And an interview with Angie Phillips. Angie is a multiple award-winning graphic design consultant. The interview I did with her a few months ago was about networking, and it was one of the most popular in the year. So I thought I'd invite her back for a few minutes because over the next 2 or 3 episodes we're celebrating the show's first birthday. We're going to discuss what's changed for her in the last year and what she's learned about introversion and extroversion. But just before speaking to Angie, a thought to help make you a better leader. Working from home, office working, and hybrid working are all big changes to the way we're used to working. How does that switch affect your team? It's easy to assume that introverts prefer working from home and extroverts don't. Although, let's be honest, it's more nuanced than that, and the really important thing is how are you helping your team to perform well in their situations, i.e. as individuals? And how are you helping your team? Your role as a leader is to create focus in your team. You could call that control, coordination, or any number of other things. But how do you create focus? Number 1, get them to understand their own best working method. Number 2, get them to work with each other remotely. And finally, of course, number 3, how do you use the greatest control mechanism you have as a manager? The meeting. One of the nice things I remember from my youth was ice skating. Who can forget Ravel's Bolero with Torval and Dean at the Olympics? Now it's okay, you don't need to have a meeting on ice, but score your meetings at the end, just like they used to with the ice skating. Get everybody to have a card with a number 1 to 10 on it, and get them to be shown in the last couple of minutes of your meeting to answer the question, how good was this meeting for you? And then each person holds up a card. It works online. It helps on engagement online. It's introvert friendly. And it helps you to understand what's going on in your team. Because what you then do is you get anybody who scores less than a 7 to explain what would have improved the meeting for them so that you can improve that in your next meeting. For more ideas about improving your meetings so the whole team are engaged, both introvert and extrovert, details of my latest book are on the sleeve notes and at introvertinbusiness.co.uk/running meetings that make things happen. Wouldn't that be a great book to give as a Christmas present? It's simple, it's quick to read, and it will really help people. Do let me know what tip you'd like to activate the entrepreneurial skills in your business, or what introvert myth you'd like exposed. Drop me an email, give me a call, or add it as a comment to your review on the iTunes store. I'd love to hear from you. But now it's time for this week's interview with Angie. Angie, the show is approaching its first birthday, and you were one of the most popular guests in the show in the last year, so thank you very much. Before we dive into anything else, remind the listeners, are you introvert or extrovert? More importantly, what does that mean to you?
I really love this question because I don't really consider myself a complete and utter extrovert, because I have my moments. I do feed off other people and I do enjoy networking in groups and meeting and chatting to people, but also I do have my moments when I actually want to escape and have a quiet sit down on my own and just think about what I'm doing and where I'm going. Some people are a little bit quieter and not so outgoing, which doesn't particularly mean that they're shy or that they're standoffish. It just means that they're dealing with the situation differently to other people. And we've labelled them introverts and extroverts.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you. Now, a year ago, nobody would have thought that all of our shops would be shut and we'd be walking around dressed like bank robbers with masks on. What's changed for you in the last year?
Well, it's certainly a surprise, really. When we think about it now, if we'd been warned, what would we have done? I've been very lucky. I've worked consistently throughout lockdown. I've got regular clients who I work for, and I've had quite a few new ones. I've managed to maintain my networking on Zoom with several different groups, and I've kept up the one-to-ones. In fact, I've probably had more one-to-ones this year than I have in previous years. What would I have done differently? Probably looked into more digital side of design work, downloads, virtual, the kind of stuff which people don't actually need printing for. But really and truly, I don't think I would have done a lot different.
So you've spent a lot more time networking again, but the focus, I think you were saying, has changed. So you've done some more one-to-ones because of the remote networking situation.
Yeah, I think it's enabled me to meet people who I probably wouldn't have actually been able to meet.
Brilliant.
I've made some really good contacts outside the normal travelling zone of an hour. And I've even spoken to digital agencies in Poland and in India. So I'm worldwide.
So what would you take of this? If COVID were to end tomorrow, I know it's not going to, but if it were, what would you take as lessons from the last year and put them permanently into your business?
Make more effort to do the one-to-ones with people, whether that is face-to-face or on Zoom, but it does generate relationships, it does improve, and it does work still on Zoom. It's not as impersonal as I felt it was a kind of 2 years ago.
So your attitude to using Zoom or whatever has changed a bit. You're a bit warmer to it, and you'd focus still on relationships, but in a lot more depth.
Absolutely. I was kind of often very, very tentative about doing a Zoom meeting at this time last year, whereas now I'm just, let's get on Zoom. Do you want me to Zoom you? Yeah. And it's actually unusual to have a phone conversation now.
It's funny, isn't it, how phones now seem like the odd one out. In the last year then, what have you learned about introvert and extrovert behaviours and personalities?
Trying to deal with Zoom when you're an introvert must be very, very tiring. I can see in some ways you're still in your own space and you've got your own energy to conserve, but trying to get heard, trying to get your opinion over when somebody's not facilitating the meeting properly, I do feel that introverts may have suffered.
So that implies that as an extrovert or as somebody that's facilitating a meeting, there's some work that you could do to allow the introverts to be heard more. Any idea what?
I think you've got to be aware, even if you don't know who is an introvert and who is an extrovert, if somebody's sitting in the meeting and not actually getting a word in edgeways, or looking at it from the other side of it, if somebody else is sitting in the meeting and consistently talking over everybody and continually going on and on and on, as a facilitator, I think you have to be very aware of it and politely jump in and either curtail talkative person, but also ask those people who are sitting in a more quiet situation if they'd like to add anything, and also be aware if someone is trying to speak, kind of raising their hand or indicating. I think as a facilitator, it's your job to be aware of those and ask them for their contributions.
And anything that you think the introvert in the Zoom could do to be heard more easily?
Probably wave your arms around a bit more.
Okay. No, and that could be that simple. Sometimes I think with all this technology, we forget that the answer can be very simple, and sometimes very simple cuts through some of the rubbish. I mean, I know you love those cards that you hold up in front of the screen with funny messages on. Completely low tech, but it works.
It's perfect. I think one thing for the introverted sort of people is use the chat box. kind of message the facilitator, say, I have something to say, I would like to make a comment, use the chat box to ask questions, on the hope that the facilitator is actually reading the chat boxes. But that is there for you. There's certain flags in Zoom that you can use to make people aware. You can raise your hand, you can put a thumbs up. So, try to make yourself seen, but in a comfortable way that you're happy with.
Brilliant, thank you. And changing the subject slightly then, what is it that makes you a great award-winning graphic design consultant?
I do try and listen to my customers and see what they actually want and then what they actually need, which are two different things sometimes. I'm very aware of misunderstandings can happen, so you have to dive in a little bit more to understand the situations. And I tend to look at it from a customer point of view. If I'm creating a leaflet for somebody, I want to know the information of how much it is, where I can get it, what it does for me. I don't just want to hear that this is a great product and I'm selling it for X amount of money.
So listen a lot to the customer, look at it from the customer point of view, and then play that back to them to check it. Brilliant. How can listeners get back in touch with you?
angcreativedesign.co.uk.
Fantastic. It's been lovely speaking to you, and let's hope that the next year is less interesting than the last year.
I think it should be more interesting.
Thanks a lot. And now it's time for Introvert Myth of the Week. Those crazy stories that I hear and you hear that some people actually believe. Introverts can fix themselves and become extroverts. Why would they even want to? Okay, I know the answer to that. There's a generic bias where extrovert is seen as good and introvert not so good. The very fact that the question gets even asked, and it does, is proof of that. But let's look at some other things. Networks. Bigger is better. Oh, isn't that an extrovert biased thing? It's also not true. Loud is good. Certainly extrovert biased, but it's not true. Fast answers and quick quips are often seen as good, with more thoughtful people less so. And then the final one, of course, that makes me die every time, the open plan office. Who invented that productivity killer? Well, maybe there's a good thing about never getting back to working in the office all the time. Madly stereotyping for a moment, a world without introverts would be a world with fewer scientists, musicians, mathematicians, and accountants. Being more serious though, the importance of well thought through answers in debates and a different result in team meetings cannot be overstated. One of the biggest problems in any team is groupthink, where everybody just hairs off in the same direction, even though it's possibly not right, versus a rich diversity of thinking in the team. So no, introverts cannot fix themselves, nor would you actually want them to. There may be tactics they can use to help and perhaps appear more extroverted at times, but just aping extroversion does not help, and underneath it all, we need to be who we are to be the most effective person that we are. As Dr. Seuss said, be who you are and say how you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself in any direction you choose. Thank you for listening to Activate Your Introvert, and I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I'd love to see your reviews on the iTunes store. Thank you once again, and catch up with you next week.